Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is coming off of last week. We're talking today about how to maintain the physical intimacy for both partners when you've been together a long time.
And really, those are all very important words. You've been together a long time, right? So this isn't just the honeymoon stage.
Oh, yeah.
And for both partners
people.
and physical intimacy. And like Aaron said, this is a follow-up to last week's episode where we talked about emotional intimacy. And if you haven't heard that episode, we do recommend listening to that one, even if it's after this, because both parts of intimacy are very important. It is not just about the act of being in the bedroom. And we actually put up a reel that has gone to millions of views now. And what it says at the beginning is that intimacy does not start in the bedroom. It starts with, and then it's listing a bunch of things, some of which we'll reiterate on today's episode. We'll also be adding some points. But think about that wanting to be in the bedroom together and engage in the act, it's not going to just happen when you're disconnected or not prioritizing each other, not feeling like you're really a team. There's so many aspects to this.
Or if you've been hurt or upset by something your partner said, and I know you're going to go into this, but even the spontaneous versus responsive desire types, even if, and I'm already starting to get into it, even if men fall more into the spontaneous, I know plenty of people, and even for myself, if I feel that there's something I feel hurt or offended by, or I took something personally, I'm not going to just feel this spontaneous desire, even if that is more of my natural state, would be more spontaneous. Like, I think a lot of men would say, just invite me into it, like I'll be ready. But even that, I think, has some variation. Again, like, do you feel like you just took something really personal and your partner put you down? That's obviously going to play a role in the physical intimacy.
Right.
And again, that is inside of that conversation that we talked about last week, the emotional side.
So what Aaron just described is that there are two different desire types. And this is really simplifying a very big topic, but it's useful for you to think about for yourself. So there's spontaneous, which would be kind of like, as it's stated, you just out of the blue can feel desire, right? And this would mean I'm just feeling that spark. I just feel this sudden surge. I feel this sudden interest. Whereas a responsive desire type is that it's more so triggered from external stimuli. So it's more so like I'm responding to the environment or our interactions or what we're doing. I think definitely men and women can fall into both types, but generally, again, sometimes these generalizations, you have to remember there's always nuances, there's always exceptions, but by and large, women do fall into responsive desire. And for me, this is definitely the case that and this is kind of giving you a preview of coming attractions where we're going to talk about some specific ways to maintain physical intimacy. But for me, it was really helpful to learn that because I could somewhat feel as though something was wrong, that I wasn't just spontaneously like sitting there on the couch and I'm like just ready to go. I thought, oh, is that normal or not, right? Because that might be the case in the honeymoon stage. But think about that. That is a very exciting, special time of a relationship that naturally does change. And so you want to remember that you can't compare your intimate life now, which some of you listening are maybe a few years in, some of you are decades in. You can't compare where you are now to the honeymoon stage. That can't be the comparison.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even saying that you don't compare to other people, and maybe other people is also the romantic movies you watch. I don't know. So whatever your basis for comparison is, I think that's a great point. You can't even compare to your earlier versions. I think that's really such a smart thing to say. And I just wanted to add a few sort of blocks, that we see. Why do we specify that it's the years you're together? Because naturally there are just some things that happen in your sharing a modern life full of adult responsibilities that end up becoming kind of barriers to your physical and emotional intimate life. But today, we're really talking about the physical. So it really is just that, like, responsibilities pile up. And so those pile up, it adds stress. We've talked about before, you have external stress, you can have sort of personal stress from your own meaning and psychology, and then you also have relational stress, which is probably something external, but the way your partner interacts with you about it makes it worse. And we all are very familiar with relational stress. So all of that piles up. Those levels of stress pile up. And that does weigh on you, right? And I know we have a great podcast coming up about the mental load and capacity. So you're going to want to really tune in on that later this week. And that's a part of that. That's what really starts to limit some of your physical desire. But there's also just this getting used to each other. I mean, there's the routine. And, a modern, long-term adult relationship is just filled with having your attention and effort go to multiple places.
Yeah.
Maybe we could say when you first get married, you're doing your own careers, you don't have any kids. It's like, you just have sort of less responsibility.
Yeah.
It's just you're not even into the routine, let's say, of all of the things that it takes to manage, like an adult life with its responsibilities. But the other part of this is kind of combined with the next point, is that you get sort of comfortable with each other. You can get more complacent. You don't put as much effort in because you are putting your attention effort towards other things like the bills and parenting and your job and the grass and maintaining the home, and then maybe your friendships, maybe filling your own cup. So there are a lot of different focuses, obviously, for one's life. You just have to take that into consideration. But the other part of this is you do start to build up what we'll just categorize as a level of, I know who you are. And that's what your mind is really wired for, is prediction. You categorize things in your mind, and then your partner becomes one of these things. It becomes a thing where your partner's in this category. If I say this topic, they're going to respond like this. They get triggered by these things. They're really focused on these things. And so you almost wake up every day already having that built in. Like, I know who my partner is. I know what today's going to be like. I know the mood they're going to wake up in. I know what they're going to do today. They may or may not give me a lot of affection or attention. And, that's sometimes okay. But all of that is like this background subconscious programming that is actually driving your emotional state and then your actions with your partner. So it's just so easy to get more into the routine. This is how it's going to go. There my partner is. There my partner is again. We wake up. It's kind of the same day. And then all this added with the daily responsibilities, it can just drain your energy. So all your energy is going out to all these other things, predicting things, managing things. And so what's left over in terms of effort and attention towards your intimate life?
I love that. And I want to add too, and we're going to be shortly getting into some specific points for maintaining physical intimacy. I promise we're going to give you strategies. But that comfort, let's be honest, it can become complacency. And I know you might not initially think, oh yeah, you're right, I'm complacent. But just check it out. To Aaron's point, do you assume you know how they're going to be, their attitude? Have you stopped being curious about them? Do you ask the same old questions every day? Do you already anticipate what kind of mood they're going to be in after dinner, and you already know your routine? And also just look at your broader life. Have you stopped putting in effort to make your partner feel desired or for them to desire you? Again, if you think about that, either you and or your partner could be that responsive type, then you have to remember that they're not, one or both of you, you're not going to just spontaneously feel it. So it's going to be us responding to the environment, to the things that we're doing, to our interactions. And are we trying to create that interest and that attraction? And so just check it out. Have I gotten complacent? Have I stopped putting in the effort to keep that spark alive, to maintain a sense of romance, which we don't use that word often, but it's different than letting our relationship become a roommate dynamic, which don't get us wrong. There are seasons and there are definitely parts of a marriage that feel very functional. You hear us talk about that. We've got to function. There are the things to do, and there are the kind of roommate type responsibilities, and there's the management. But that's an island that couples can stay stuck on. Is Function Island. And then you're not getting to Fulfillment
It
Island.
sounds like a reality show.
It does, but we talk about those three islands, right? Of dysfunction, function versus fulfillment. And remember that intimacy, although it's going to look different in each season, you will always hear us remind you of that. Seasons are going to look different. It is a part of maintaining that fulfillment and connection, which is equally as important as you functioning well as a team and getting things done. Now, we're about to go into these specific points, and as you hear them, I know you're going to be thinking, all right, Freemans, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I don't want to forget this. I don't want to lose sight of it after 2 days of being motivated. How do we create this change consistently? And that's why actually the day that this episode is coming out is the day that the Best of Us 30-Day Couples Challenge, which by the way is a special edition challenge. It is not open every month. And in fact, it won't be open for at least another 5 or 6 months from now, if not maybe waiting till January next year. So you want to start this challenge because it is all about reigniting emotional and physical intimacy, but in a way that's actually realistic. Because let's be real, we're busy, tired parents who are running a big business. So these aren't unrealistic things, but they're going to give you intimacy activities, connection prompts, and appreciation gestures. The testimonials are incredible. So go to mycoupleschallenge.com/best and sign up while it's available, because again, it's not going to be available every single month. But that's going to be able to make you implement a lot of these things, not just for a day, not just for 3 days, but consistently for 30 days. And you'll feel like, oh my gosh, this is us. This is the us that we love. This is the us that makes us feel fulfilled while we're getting things done too.
Yes, we really look forward to having you in there. We're recording this the day before, but today, as you're hearing this, go and get yourself registered. It's starting today for the next 30 days through April. So we'll see you over on that side. Let's go through here really with the main points for this podcast episode. So Jocelyn, why don't you really kick us off here with what are some of the things that a listener can take away right now and do to really maintain great physical intimacy?
Well, first and foremost, it's important that you actually check in on your satisfaction with your intimate life. And we recommend, you're going to want to remember this, at least quarterly. So that's 4 times a year. So that's actually a part of the family meeting guide structure. So for those of you who've been listeners, you know we're big on having a family meeting, and there's a weekly check-in, there's a quarterly, and there's a yearly, all with different questions. And it's important that you do check in on one of the things being quarterly, intimacy, because life can change a lot in 3 months. It can look very different in this season versus, 3 months ago or even a month ago. And you do not want to wait a whole year, if not years, to ever ask your partner, hey, babe, how satisfied are you with our intimacy? Because if you don't ever ask that question, how will you know? A lot of people are nervous to bring up intimacy, or they're worried, I don't want to make them feel as though they're not doing a good job, or that I'm not happy. Like, there can be a lot of shame or embarrassment that can come up around physical intimacy specifically. And so you and or your partner might be nervous to just bring it up out of the blue. But if you have a quarterly check-in, maybe you already use our family meeting guide, then pull this open and do this quarterly. But it's going to open up an intentional, safe space to actually be honest. And here's the thing, how can you ever make your intimate life, specifically physical, better if you aren't able to share, hey, babe, here's what I do like. here's what I'd like to do more of, or here's what I'd like to shift, or right, like you can share in any way, but this is the mindset you want to have for this conversation. My partner is not trying to criticize me. They're not trying to put me down. They're sharing with me how I can make them even happier in our intimate life. And don't I want them to enjoy it? This isn't just about checking something off the list like, babe, we're maintaining our intimacy. Get in the bedroom.
Yeah, that voice sounded real attractive.
Just the way I'm saying that. No, you want to make sure that the two of you are enjoying your time, because also, let's be real, speaking from a female perspective, that's the only perspective I can speak from. I'm not going to want more of it if I'm not enjoying it. And so think about that. Do we check in often on how satisfied we are?
Well, it's a good lead in then to the next point. And I do hear this sort of question a lot, whether it's online and a little bit within our own sessions, but this idea of just quantity, right? So is quantity, is frequency, is the amount of times that you're physically intimate with your partner, is that really the same as what you're talking about? The quality, the level of satisfaction, how do we balance that? So yeah, why don't you take us into this idea of quality and frequency?
Well, exactly what you said. I mean, people will commonly ask either us or it's just an online conversation, right? Of like, how often should we be intimate? As if there should be a should, right? And there is no standard. Every couple really is different. And that's why actually a lot of intimacy experts don't even share how often they're intimate, because they don't want that comparison around frequency. And that also shouldn't be the main focus. It really should be about quality, because it's going to then influence your quantity. So that should be really the first place that you put your attention on, is let's focus on quality. Let's make sure that this is the most enjoyable experience. So look, even if we're intimate once a week, I'm just putting out a random number, let's make it incredibly satisfying and fulfilling for both of us. Like, let's not just make it a quick 3-minute in and out thing. Like, let's actually make this an experience. Let's maybe make it more romantic. Let's make it more intentional. Let's try new things together that makes it feel a little spicy, like some new adventure in there. So if you then focus on that quality, it's going to make you want it more frequently. So do you see how that's really connected? But again, that's all reliant on the fact that you talk about what makes it more enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point to make about the communication around it, because I think the reality is your time that you can focus on it does change, especially if you're parents to younger kids. So these are all factors, and I think that's why you mentioned one of the first things being we have to check on this really like quarterly, because things in our life are really going to change. We have to factor in time. But now we're obviously talking about how do we make it more satisfying, and we're going to be drawn to more frequency when the satisfaction is higher. So I think that's where we can take this next part about emotional intimacy, though it being different for each partner, different in the way that the emotional intimacy is felt, as well as like the actions around it are different for men and women. But I think the basis being that is kind of the foreplay for physical intimacy. I mean, there's going to have to be a level of emotional intimacy on connection, on security, on me feeling desired by you. And then again, it'll change how that lands based on the male female perspective. So I think mainly we would say you do have to focus on actually creating attraction or the connection. And a lot of that is going to start with your attitude, right? It's not just about the action. It's not about the action of initiating physical intimacy with your partner, or taking their hand and going to the bedroom, or even all of the, some might say mechanics of
Yes.
of physical intimacy, but even just the act of it, right? We just really have to be paying attention to, are we creating attraction, which largely is going to start with what is our attitude around it. And then from there can be your effort and then your actions that you then take with your partner, right?
Well, let's be real. The longer that you're together, the more you can fall into patterns and dynamics that are unattractive, right? There's certain ways that you're showing up, like you said, a certain attitude that you tend to show up with, or you've gotten complacent, so you're showing up complacent, or the way you're communicating or not communicating, how you're handling conflict, all those other topics that we cover. Some of those, when we aren't being conscientious, we're not putting in effort, they can be pretty unattractive. They can be
Mm.
repelling. And you have to remember that intimacy is also an energetics thing. Not just like you said, it's not just the mechanics. It's not, well, babe, I made you dinner. Okay, but did you make dinner like being a grump or being disengaged,
Grump.
right? Or just asking really boring questions? Okay,
Mm.
well, so it's not just what you're doing, it is the energy that you're bringing to the dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big place to focus on is, okay, if we do want to make our intimate life more of a priority, okay, what sparks interest and intimacy? Attraction. Attraction isn't just physical. It's not just how I look. It's the energetics. Do I feel energetically drawn to you? And so we won't get too into like the quantum physics or too energetics. I think you're getting the point. So ask yourself, how am I showing up energetically? What is the energy I bring to the room, to our interactions? Am I showing up in a way that is attractive emotionally, energetically, physically? So attraction is also important because, again, this isn't just about checking something off the list of like, okay, yeah, we're maintaining our physical intimacy. It's like you want to feel that draw towards each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think let's move to the next point because they'll have some areas that they intertwine. But for me, I think there's also a place to think about priority.
Mm.
And as much as couples might not want to maybe admit it at times, I think it's the honest conversation is where does intimacy fall on your priority? And I think the thing is, we talk about sacrifice more on the podcast, or is that on
Yeah.
sessions? That
I
was
mean,
on
definitely
sessions, yeah.
sessions. Yeah.
So I won't go into this too much, but a part of your life and a part of your decision making is always that you're making a sacrifice of something else.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to do that. There's so much you could focus on. And you just really need to, as a couple, pay attention to, well, what's like the most important? Because we just literally can't focus on everything all at once. And that's where your communication about what are your priorities become a very important conversation in terms of physical intimacy. And I think the hard thing, because it goes with the first question of, well, what's your level of satisfaction now? I think the next part of that, it's really, hey, if I'm going to just actually be open to your answer, where does it fall on your level of priority right now?
True.
And I think if we really look, you got to give an answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have you put running your own business, or have you put, it's not, all right, it's not necessarily like it's one or the other, right? But you can really only focus on one at a time, people say, or one or two kind of big relationship areas at a time.
Mm.
And you may be focused on parenting because it might be really hard in this season, or maybe finances and the economy has really caused you to look at things different.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you have to completely sacrifice intimacy, but you have to ask yourself, in the season I'm in personally, and then the one that we're in or striving for as a couple, where is intimacy currently falling on our level of priority? Is it one? Which, it's easy to say that is when you're in that honeymoon type of
Mm-hmm.
phase. Or is that 5 right now?
Yeah.
And is that the appropriate place for it right now? Can you both have a level of acceptance that it could be at a 5 if a number of other things are at that level of priority? Or would you say it's at a 5, but it shouldn't be,
Yeah.
right? We've let personal down relaxing time, become like number 2.
Mm-hmm.
We watch TV, and parenting has been hard. That's kind of like number 1. And obviously our finances. And then if we looked at your actions, would it look like relaxing time is the 3rd highest priority?
Mm.
And so having these kinds of conversations about the level of priority your intimacy is at, and then saying, well, where should it be and what can we agree on? And at that point, all right, what shifts do we need to make and what do we need to sacrifice to make this a higher priority? So I actually meant to ask this as a question,
But I
but I
love what
kept
you're
on
sharing.
going. Yeah. So, what would you say about this level of priority?
Well, you're spot on, obviously, in that we're always choosing a sacrifice. And that's why we have to know what our priorities are. And I think what you said is really relatable in that there are going to be seasons where intimacy is either not a priority at all, or it's definitely not one of the top ones. The one that comes right to my mind, right, is the newborn stage. That it's definitely not the top of mind thing, right? In the early days. And for us, that was the first several months because of the obvious things, right? You are tired. You are literally trying to figure out how to keep a human alive. You're working on new schedules. For me, I
I
was
mean, you're healing.
healing.
Yeah.
I was obviously healing. And so I think the majority of couples, by far 99% of couples, could relate to that season being the time. But there are also other instances where one partner might be struggling with something health wise, or like you said, maybe it's a really hard parenting season. But here's the caveat I would give is that while we can make intimacy or talk about how it might not be the number one priority, physical intimacy, here's what I do think though. I think that being connected has to be a top priority because when you are connected, you show up better in every other area of your life. And I know you know that's true. You show up as a better parent. You show up better in your profession or with your friends or with family. So I do think that we view us being connected as the foundation in which everything else can thrive. And with that, if you think about intimacy as connection, then there's the emotional intimacy part, and that might be the main thing we're focusing on is being emotionally intimate. And physical intimacy is something we're, trying to get going or we're trying to make more of a priority, and that's okay if it's not 3 to 4 times a week or every day. That's not the reality for a lot of couples. Again, don't just focus on the quantity, excuse me. But I also would say don't let it be a long stint of no physical intimacy. And so, again, I'm not trying to put a timeline on that. I'm just saying that I think you have to identify when it's been deprioritized for too long and not say, okay, yeah, we're trying to go from 0 to 100. Let's go from not being intimate for a few months to like, yeah, let's be intimate 5 times a week. You don't have to make that huge swing. You can just say, hey, let's make it more of a priority and let's set the intention of making it a really enjoyable experience once a week. We're just giving examples, right? So, I do think that you need to remember when you are feeling connected, when that you've got that intimate closeness, you thrive and you're stronger in every other area. So that mindset is really important. Now, in closing, do remember that there's a thread in all of this, that there are going to be different seasons. And so it's really important that you aren't comparing, like we said, definitely not to the honeymoon stage, but don't compare this season to the last season of life you were in. You really need to think about the present moment and what does our relationship need from us now? What does maintaining and enjoying physical intimacy in this season look like? And you know what? It's probably going to be different in 3 months from now or a year from now. That's why those check-ins are so important. So we hope that a lot of these mindset perspectives are giving you a way to think about this to then show up. This isn't about the mechanics. We're not going to give you the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, because that's stuff you can talk about and figure out. It's the mindset that drives how you approach this conversation. Now, again, if you do want some specific ideas, and we're talking specific, right, for ways to spark emotional and physical intimacy, then start the Best of Us 30-Day Couples Challenge. We will link that in the show notes again. It's only going to be open for a few days after the first. And then, like we said, it's not going to be available for at least 5 months, if not until next January. So go to mycoupleschallenge.com/best. It is absolutely incredible. It's my favorite challenge, I'll be honest, because it's fun. It gets you out of the routine. It brings out the best in each other, the best in your relationship, while still understanding the realities of your life. So we hope this episode has opened up some great conversations for you guys. Make sure that you approach this as a team and that you stay curious and you stay open to each other, because that's what it's really all about. So with that, you guys, make sure you hit subscribe if you are new here so that you can hear past and future episodes. And if you've been a listener for at least one episode, it would mean so much if you hit that 5-star rating. That helps us reach so many people. And then we will talk to you on the next episode.